the run for the 2nd District. It's one of the most closely watched congressional races. Tonight, we go one-on-one with each of the candidates. This is What Matters. Good evening, I'm Cathy Lewis. Tonight on What Matters, we bring you conversations with the 3 congressional candidates in the 2nd District, one of the most closely watched races in the country. First, Congressman Glenn Nye, the Democrat in the race. Welcome, Congressman Nye. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Cathy. Great to be here.
Well, you know, there is so much talk in Washington and across the country today about the deficit. I'm sure you're hearing about it on the campaign trail.
Right.
What thoughts do you have about how to get hold of the deficit? Where do we go from here?
Well, first of all, the debt and the deficit are big problems that we need to tackle. They're problems that aren't the fault of one political party, but of the actions that folks in Washington have taken for far too long, and it's time we get a handle on it. The first thing we got to do, Cathy, is knock this recession out, though. The best way for us to be able to handle the debt and the deficit is get our economy back on a strong footing, which is why I've been working recently, leading a charge in Congress to extend all the tax cuts to allow our small businesses to have the ability to go out and make those hires, add a couple of people to their payroll, grow their business, really get our economy back on a strong footing. That's one of the best ways we can tackle the debt and the deficit. But I also think we've got to change the way business is done in Washington. And I've written a law that will do that called the SWEEP Act, which is designed to do something pretty simple. It eliminates duplicative and wasteful spending in Washington. And what it does is it sets up a bipartisan commission. So it's not a political battle going on about this, but it sets up a bipartisan group that looks at all the government spending and points out where there's duplicative overlapping programs or programs that just aren't performing, makes recommendations to Congress, and then Congress takes an up or down vote on the whole package, wipe out, sweep out all that unnecessary duplicative spending. That's a good first step to defeating the deficit.
When it comes to spending, that's certainly one of the arguments that's been made around the proposed closure of the Joint Forces Command,
right,
that it will be more efficient to close the command and that it's part of the cost-cutting efforts in the Department of Defense. The estimates are something on the order of close to $1 billion impact in the community. Is GIFCOM gone, and do we pick up the pieces, or do you still think there's a chance to save it?
I'm taking on that fight, and I think we're going to keep the jobs at GIFCOM right here in Hampton Roads, and we're actually making good progress on that, especially lately. The Secretary of Defense made a proposal, suggested to the President that he thought closing or realigning GIFCOM could save some money. I don't agree. And the Defense Department hasn't done any kind of analysis that would back up that claim. And this is something that we've forced Defense Department officials to admit on the record in hearings in the Armed Services Committee. I'm a member of that committee. Randy Forbes and Rob Whitman are also members of that committee with me. But we're working together as a Hampton Roads team, a bipartisan team, also including Bobby Scott on the Budget Committee, both Senators Webb and Warner and Governor McDonnell fighting together to keep GIFCOM there because we believe that GIFCOM provides vital value to the military. Even the Secretary of Defense admits that. Now, the Secretary says he thinks we might be able to save some money by changing the way it works or moving some people around, but they haven't done one bit of analysis to prove that. Just this week, actually, we had the chairman of the Armed Services Committee come down on our side and say, I can't support any changes at GIFCOM without some kind of analysis done to show how it would actually save any money in the long run. It may not. I don't even think they're going to be able to show that. But at the very least, we're going to force the Defense Department to do that analysis before they make a recommendation.
Let's talk about health reform for a minute. You voted against the Health Reform Act.
Right.
And there are Democrats who say that you broke faith with them on that point. They were very interested in health reform. Mm-hmm. So how do you respond to those critics?
Well, a couple of things. First, Cathy, you know, something I've learned about the job of representative is you can't make everybody happy on every single day. But what you can do, and I think what a representative needs to do and has a responsibility to do, is look carefully at every legislation that's put in front of us and make a decision about whether you think it's right for the people that you represent. I work for the people of Hampton Roads. My decisions in Congress are guided by what they think and what will affect the people here in the Hampton Roads communities. I carefully read the health care bill. I don't think that it's the right plan. I understand it's an important topic and that reform is needed, but I can't vote yes on a bill just because someone in my party says that it's a good idea if I don't agree with the actual proposals made in the bill. When I ran in 2008 for Congress, just 2 years ago for the first time, I said I'd take an independent approach, and I'd make the best decision I could based on what's actually in the bills, not based on what people in the party tell me. I'm just not going to take a knee-jerk partisan approach on issues. And I've found, Cathy, that most people, including most Democrats I talk to, say, hey, you know what, we appreciate the fact that even if we may disagree with you sometimes on some issues, you did what you thought was right after listening to the people that you represent.
Just to make sure that we manage expectations, we've got about 3 minutes left. We want to leave the 1 minute at the end for you to talk to the voters and say whatever you have to say. So we've got about 2 minutes for this one. Sea level rise. Dr. Jim Cook at Old Dominion just produced this State of the Region report, and he said in the presentation, sea level rise, he believes, is more of a challenge to the region than transportation. And I wonder what you would do about sea level rise. What is the federal role in that?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think we need to do is try to cut down on carbon emissions by diversifying our energy resources. We have right here at home in the USA a great diversity in potential of different types of energies besides just carbon-based fuels, and we need to use those. That includes nuclear, it includes solar, it includes wind. That's why I've been part of a coalition of people pushing to get Virginia out in the lead in offshore wind development. ODU is also working on developing biodiesels from algae. We have a lot of opportunities in this country to go down different paths and reduce our dependence on foreign oil, but also on fossil fuels by just having a diverse base of the way we use energy. It's important. If you go through any nor'easter here in Norfolk or Virginia Beach, you know what sea level rise can do to us, and we need to be taking some proactive steps to head that off. This is a bipartisan issue. Both in the last debate, presidential debate, both candidate at the time, Obama and McCain, both said we need to take this seriously. As
we think about sea level rise, and we've got about 30 seconds for this, but as we think about sea level rise in terms of some of the remediation that will have to be done, is there a federal role to play in that in terms of shoring up and lifting up the land?
Sure, absolutely. And in fact, I've supported efforts for things like, for instance, at Fort Monroe, to ensure that we strengthen the seawall there to protect that Fort Monroe, that beautiful base property, from encroaching sea levels. There are areas around Hampton Roads where we know we need to invest to ensure that we protect our neighborhoods from the potential of sea level rise. It's not just a long-term issue, it's a short-term issue when we look at nor'easters and the effects of hurricanes too.
Well, one of our commitments to the candidates is we end the interview with 1 minute for you to say whatever is on your mind, and that way you can't say you didn't get to say what you wanted to.
All right, first of all, thank you for having me today. I really appreciate being able to have this conversation with you. When I ran for this office 2 years ago, I had just gotten back from Iraq. I'd spent a year there, almost a year in Afghanistan. And what I liked about my work overseas is it was non-political. We were concerned about doing things that got the job done, that accomplished the mission. That's exactly the approach I brought to Congress. I try to focus on what will achieve the needs for the people of Hampton Roads, fighting for small business tax cuts, fighting for help for our veterans who have served us so honorably, fighting for our military families and making sure that we deliver their benefits to them on time and as promised. I've focused on fighting and winning on keeping our carrier here and on keeping Joint Forces Command open because of the jobs associated with those projects. I'm just looking forward to continuing to fight for the people of Hampton Roads on the issues that are important to Hampton Roads and not getting wrapped up in all the partisan bickering that people are so tired of.
Glenn Nye, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Cathy.
That was incumbent Congressman Glenn Nye, the Democrat in the race. Up next, Republican candidate Scott Rigell. Scott Rigell, thank you for joining us.
Cathy, thank you so much for having me today.
It's nice to have you here. One of the things about which we've been hearing so much, you can hardly turn on the television without hearing about it, is the deficit that the country finds itself in. So as a congressman, what would you do? What are your ideas about how we get hold of the deficit?
Well, this is one of the principal reasons I got in the race. As a businessman with 30 years experience reading financial statements, I know that if these financial trends aren't addressed, we truly are in for some potentially catastrophic consequences. So I'd start with reversing the TARP and stimulus funds that have not yet been released. I think that's the low-hanging fruit. I think the stimulus program, though well-intentioned, has been completely ineffective, and it's just added to the deficit. I'm strongly in favor of a freeze on federal hiring so that we freeze the number of federal employees we have. I mean, I think we could set aside some reasonable accommodations for, of course, Department of Defense, anything related to Homeland Security. But that would allow the size of the federal government to actually get smaller over time without resorting to layoffs, which I don't think is is appropriate. And then every department, I think we see the good work that Governor McDonnell has done in Richmond. This same type of common sense business-like approach to expense reduction in really every department should be pursued. And then finally, with the entitlements, we've got to have a bipartisan approach to that, and leading to an up or down vote. And I'm strongly in favor of that, because we have to come together as Democrats and Republicans to tackle entitlements.
When you say entitlements, what are you talking about?
Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, the big ones, the big three.
And boy, I'll tell you, with our aging population, Social Security is certainly something I think we're going to be talking a lot more about.
It is, and one of the key ways to drive everything, whether it's education, transportation, meeting the obligation that we have to our military, is job creation. And that's a key part of why I'm running. I've been producing and creating jobs with my wife Terry at our family business for many, many years, about 20 here, and we started out with a janitorial business. Most people know us from the automobile industry, but it was really, we got started, Terry hired me and I hired Terry. We were the janitors. I want to bring that kind of job creating experience to Washington.
But you know, when you're in your own company, you can do things on your own and
right.
do what you want to create jobs. And of course, in Congress, a little bit different. So how would you go about, what are some job creation ideas that you have that you think would
Well, I think two things are really reaching out from Washington and really choking the life out of our entrepreneurs and our small business owners. One is excessive regulation. I'll give you a quick example. Off the coast of Virginia, we should be having really experimenting in wind farms. You know, let's make that energy alternative work. You know, it takes 7 to 9 years to get just to get the permit. In Great Britain, it's 2. See, this is slowing down job creation, and I want to push back against that in a responsible way.
I want to ask you a question about some of the ads that are on the air right now that talk about the numbers of times that people vote with the majority or vote with the speaker. So if we waved a magic wand and it was Congressman Rigell and Speaker Boehner, and 2 years from now you had to run knowing that on close to 90% of Congress votes with the majority anyway, how do you justify that?
Well, it's a little difficult to answer that in this sense, in that we're talking about hundreds of votes that I don't even know what each and every issue is. The key here is, would a congressman or congresswoman exercise independent judgment and what's in the best interest of the American people in the long run? And I think what's been demonstrated with the incumbent versus where I want to go is that, for example, on the stimulus, a bill that's added over $800 billion to our deficit, the incumbent was in lockstep with the speaker, and I would have taken a different path.
Let's talk about JIFCOM for a moment, because boy, Joint Forces Command is something that is going to have a tremendous impact in this community, I suspect, regardless of what the final outcome is. Is Joint Forces gone, and ought we not to pick up the pieces now, or do you think there's still a shot to save it? You know,
well, I do. I absolutely think there's a shot to save it. The essential function of JEFCOM, interoperability, the ability to work together, our different forces as a cohesive unit, that work is going to continue. Technology is going to change. We need to make sure that our different services can talk to one another and operate. So the question is not, is this work going to continue? It's a question of how many people are going to be dedicated to it, and where does that work take place? I don't want the work just shifted to Orlando, Florida. That's not saving anything.
We have just close to 3 minutes left, so I just want to make sure that we manage your expectations so that you'll have your minute at the end to say what you want to say. As you know, the State of the Region report was just released, and it talked about sea level rise, and it said, and this was, I think, the shocking piece of it for a lot of folks, is that Dr. Cook, former president and retired president of Old Dominion University, said he thinks sea level rise is actually more of a threat to the region than transportation. So I wonder, what do you see as the federal role in that, and what do you think about this issue of sea level rise?
Well, the causal factor that's being debated worldwide really is global warming and its relationship to sea level rise. I think there's some dispute there. I mean, the Earth is certainly heated and cooled over the millennia. We can, should, and really must take practical steps. The fact that there's some sea level rise, that's not in dispute. So we need to make sure that our transportation plans and our city planning and our federal planning as to where roads go, where new development is allowed, that we take into consideration that in all likelihood sea levels will continue to rise, although slowly they are going to continue to rise. And I really want to bring a long-term view on every subject that's confronting our great nation, whether it's the deficit or whether it's construction of roads and bridges. Where do we want to be, not just 5 years out, but 10, 15, 25 years out?
Just about 30 seconds to get to your 1 minute, but it occurs to me when you talk about that I think it's tough to run for the House, because if you do want to talk about a long-term perspective and you have to run every 2 years, it's a tough thing.
Well, in some ways, but really you're just staying close to the people. That's what our founding fathers intended. That's what it's the House of Representatives. And I've been listening to people, as we've done in our business, but I've been listening to the public in town hall meetings. Anybody can come up and ask any question on any topic. And I think that distinguishes me as a candidate from the incumbent.
Well, Scott Rigell, it's time for your 1 minute.
Well, I thank you again, Kathy, for having me on the show. I truly believe this is a defining moment in our American journey. The decision that we make on November the 2nd could largely shape the direction of our country over the next 50 years. If folks truly believe that massive deficit spending creates jobs, if they truly believe that the health care bill that was passed is really the best way to care for the most people and contain cost, and if they truly believe that Speaker Pelosi ought to stay in the leadership of our United States Congress, then frankly I'm not their candidate. But if they believe in job creation, smaller, smarter government, and the American entrepreneur, the small business owner, to pull us out of this recession, as the second-generation Marine and the proud father of a third-generation Marine, I want to bring all of my experience in leadership to change Congress and set our country in the right direction.
Well done on the timekeeping. Scott Rigell, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
That was the Republican candidate, Scott Rigell. Up next, independent candidate Kenny Golden. Kenny Golden, nice to have you with us today.
Good to be here,
being
Kathy. Thank
you so much. We have about 8 minutes together, and as I told all the candidates that last minute, I turn over to you to say whatever you want. So let's get started. So much conversation nationally and locally about the deficit. I wonder, from your perspective, what would you do about the deficit?
Well, on my website, and I'm the only one who has a plan. I love some of the other guys said reduce the deficit. Well, how? Well, I have a plan, and that is you take 2% from the 15 departments of government per year until you start getting the budget down. I would get rid of the Department of Homeland Security. We never should have had that in the first place, and put those pieces back where they belong. That's $55 billion next year. And then I would split the Department of Education. And, you know, most conservatives will tell you they want to get rid of the Department of Education. I think that's not right. I want the Department of Education to do research and development, and then I want half that money to come back to the states. So that 2% is actually less than what the president has called for, and Randy Forbes has called for a 40% reduction in 5 years. 2% per year is doable. We do it. I did it as a naval officer, you know, when I was doing planning for the world cruises that I would have to take. You know, you look at it and you say, yeah, I've got $2.5 million worth of cruising to do, and the Navy gives you 2.2. You can make those decisions because you have to, and we can.
I wonder, on the question of, speaking of military, of the Joint Forces Command, and I've asked both of the other candidates this too. Is Joint Forces Command gone, do you think?
Gone. And you know how I know? Because I was the deputy J5 and J8, which is policy, plans and policy, and then we moved it to strategy and requirements, and I was the deputy there for almost 3 years. I worked at Joint Forces Command while it was being formed, so I worked for General Hobbins, General Miller, and Admiral Mayer there, directly behind Admiral Gaiman as we formed Joint Forces Command. So I was there for the formation. It just got too big, is the problem.
So what do we do now, prospectively, up to $1 billion economic impact in this community? What would you do?
6,000 really good paying jobs. And I know because I had one of them when I came back as a civilian. I worked as what we call an IPA. And those are tough jobs to lose because they're skilled jobs. And what we've got to do is there are about 8 core competencies that need to be held in Joint Forces Command that are very critical to the United States military. And I think we can save about 3,000 of those jobs if we save those core competencies. And that's what I would work towards. Saving Joint Forces Command, the command, all it takes is a pen stroke. The president can do that. It is a uniform command uniform command plan change that he'll sign, and it'll be done.
I want to ask you a campaign question. You've been affiliated with the Republican Party for a long time now, independent. The folks who watch these sorts of things say that you will take votes from Scott Rigell, the Republican candidate. If Glenn Nye is reelected, what do you say on November 3rd to that charge?
I don't say anything. You know, there are 3 people in the race. Am I intending on taking some votes from Scott Rigell? Absolutely. Am I intending on taking people from Glenn's side? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, Scott Rigell's own research indicates that I'm taking more people from Glenn than I am from Scott. But what I'm aiming for is that big 43% that USA Today and Gallup says in the middle, called independents. Those are the people I'm going to win with. If I win, I have to win those votes, and that's what I've said. I said that it's going to be 30, 30, 30, and then in the last couple of weeks, I need to get that extra 5 or 10%, and guess what? That's just about where it is right now.
We're at 4 minutes. Speaking of where we are right now, we're at 4 minutes. And that includes your 1 minute at the end, so I just want to help manage expectations there. What about health care reform? The bill is passed. Would you keep it as is? Would you adjust it? Would you vote to repeal it?
Repeal and replace. And there are a lot of people that just say repeal. The American people do want some protection. And had I been advising the president, I would have said, Mr. President, look, what we need to do the first 2 years of your administration is fix Medicare, Medicaid, prescription drugs, and S-chip. Fix those things first, and then we'll talk about how we're going to create an option that people can buy into. So that's why I would repeal and replace it, and I've always said that. We're having a health care forum by this way this Friday.
And as you think of 3 minutes left, as you think about sea level rise, certainly something that this same report that talked about the impact of Joint Forces Command also noted, the positing on the part of former ODU President Jim Cook that sea level rise may be more of a challenge to this region than transportation is, which is considerable.
Well, I think the problem with sea level rise is people haven't been looking at it. And we need to look at it because it is a reality. It's a reality whether you're one of the global warming people or not, it is a reality. As more people exist on the planet, it is going to heat up. And of course, we are 50,000 miles closer to the sun than we've ever been. So that makes a difference too. But we have to plan for it. We need to get the corps of engineers involved. What I've said is let's take the facility we have here, VMAS, and create a scenario where we look at what that's going to do and where the areas are that are going to be affected and start to work on those areas quickly. We already are affected by it. Talked to a guy in Virginia Beach, and of course Hampton has terrible flooding problems, but a guy in Virginia Beach that every time we have a nor'easter, the bottom floor of his home, because the development was in there, he's, you know, a foot below water. So we've got to fix those things now and then take a look at what we need to do 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future. And then we also need to look at that big Category 5 blowing in here, like happened in New Orleans, and how we're going to get out of here if we need to, and what we're going to do about it.
Time for your 1 minute. So I'm going to invite you to take the next minute, Kenny Golden, to say whatever is on your mind. And that way you can't say we didn't let you do it.
Oh, my goodness, no. Well, I appreciate coming out here, Kathy. This has been great. And seeing this great studio, my goodness, it's a treasure for Hampton Roads. First of all, I think I need to talk about the website, www.kennygolden.com. If you don't know Kenny Golden, go to that website, and you can call me personally, 581-7499. A woman from Eastern Shore just did that. That's my personal cell phone number. I want them to know that between my wife, my daughter, and myself, we have 67 years of service to our country, and that makes a difference. Service and experience should make a difference, and that's why I'm running, because Scott's a nice guy, Glenn's a nice guy. We're all three friends, but if you put the two of their careers together, it doesn't equal 31 years of military service, 4 years in the Pentagon and legislative affairs, and being nominated by John Warner and George Allen to be Secretary of the Navy. I think my experience trumps all that.
Kenny Golden, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Kathy. My pleasure.
If there's a part of that conversation you missed or you'd like to hear again, it's easy to do so. Just go to our website, which is whatmatters.tv. As well, if you go to hearsay.org, which is the website for our daily talk show on 89.5 WHRV-FM, you'll find a replay of the League of Women Voters debate that was conducted in mid-October. You'll find the entirety of that debate there at hearsay.org. Thanks for watching. I'm Cathy Lewis. We'll see you next week for another look at what matters.